What if I told you that the dark liquid sitting in your mug right now could literally cut your risk of Parkinson's disease by nearly half?
I mean, that sounds insane.
Right, but only if you wait exactly 90 minutes to take your first sip. So today, we are taking the world's most abused psychoactive drug and basically turning it into a biological weapon.
Yeah, and it sounds like science fiction when you frame it that way, but uh, the data we have now is fundamentally changing how we view this whole morning ritual.
Totally.
Because for millions of people, consuming caffeine is just an automatic reflex. It's just how you survive the morning. We treat it like water, completely blind to the fact that we're operating heavy biological machinery here.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I know you, the person listening to us right now, probably have a cup of coffee sitting next to you.
Very likely.
Or maybe you're, I don't know, planning your next one. Or you're still coasting on the fumes of the one you had a few hours ago. We all know that universal feeling of just needing that morning cup to clear the mental fog.
Oh, absolutely.
But our mission today in this deep dive is to completely transform your perspective. We're looking at some incredibly detailed notes and transcripts, specifically pulling from Gary Brecka's Ultimate Human series.
What?
And the goal is to take coffee from being this desperate pick-me-up and turn it into a highly optimized, science-backed tool for your health, longevity, and performance.
And to set the baseline here, I think it's important to say the objective of our analysis today is absolutely not to tell you to stop drinking coffee.
Thank goodness.
Right? Because based on the cardiovascular and neurological data we are going to explore, removing it entirely might actually be a detriment to your long-term health.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Today is about separating a mindless reactionary habit from optimal biology. We want you to drink it, but strategically. We need to explore the exact timing, the metabolic impacts, and the genuinely surprising protections it offers when you do it right.
And to optimize it, I guess we first have to understand the mechanics of the wake-up. Because I always assumed, the moment I opened my eyes and drank coffee, I was just putting energy into my body.
Like pouring gas into a tank.
Exactly, like pouring gas into a tank.
Yeah.
But there is a very specific, almost aggressive chemical transaction happening in your head the moment that first sip hits your bloodstream.
Right, and the gas in the tank concept is probably the most common misconception out there. Coffee doesn't give you energy in the form of caloric fuel.
It doesn't.
No, it alters your brain's perception of fatigue.
Yeah.
And to understand how it does that, what's fascinating here is we have to look at a molecule called adenosine.
Adenosine.
Yeah. Throughout the day, as your brain is functioning, your cells are burning ATP adenosine triphosphate for energy. When ATP is broken down, adenosine is left over as a byproduct.
Kind of like an exhaust fume.
Exactly like that. Think of it as metabolic exhaust.
Yeah.
As the day progresses, this adenosine builds up in your brain and starts binding to specific adenosine receptors.
So it's essentially an internal sleep pressure gauge, right? The more this metabolic exhaust builds up, the heavier your eyelids get.
That is the exact mechanism. When adenosine binds to those receptors, it sends a localized signal to your central nervous system saying, we've been working hard, energy stores are depleting, it's time to start powering down.
And that's what makes me want to take a nap at 3 p.m.
Precisely. That is what causes the sensation of sleepiness. Now, when you consume caffeine, an incredible molecular coincidence occurs. The caffeine molecule is structurally almost identical to the adenosine molecule.
Oh, wow. I love visualizing this. So if we think of those adenosine receptors like empty parking spots in your brain.
Right, the parking lot.
Yeah, the adenosine molecules are these little sleepiness cars constantly driving around looking for a place to park.
Perfect analogy.
And the more of them that pull into a spot, the more tired you feel. But when you drink coffee, the caffeine molecules act like these aggressive little sports cars that just speed into the lot and take up all the parking spots.
They absolutely steal the spots.
And the sleepiness cars are still driving around, but they can't park, so the fatigue signal never gets triggered.
The structural mimicry is just uncanny. Caffeine rushes the blood-brain barrier, slides perfectly into those receptor slots, but it lacks the necessary component to actually activate the sleepiness signal.
So it's a decoy.
Exactly, just acts as a barricade. Because those sleep signals are suddenly blocked, your central nervous system looks around, senses that the coast is clear, and assumes it's time to accelerate.
Because it doesn't see any fatigue.
Right. It responds by releasing a cascade of excitatory neurotransmitters, specifically dopamine and norepinephrine.
Oh, so that's the rush.
Yeah, that chemical cascade is what actually produces the sudden increase in alertness, the sharp focus, and that feeling of the fog lifting. You aren't giving your brain energy You know,
You're just blinding it.
yes, you're temporarily blinding it to its own fatigue while simultaneously hitting the neurochemical accelerator.
Which brings us to the first massive catch and really the primary rule we pulled from the sources today.
The timing.
The timing is everything. Because if I'm waking up groggy, my natural instinct is to immediately flood that parking lot with those caffeine sports cars, literally before my feet even hit the floor.
Of course.
But the science insists we need to wait 60 to 90 minutes after waking before having that first cup. And I have to admit, the first time I heard this, I thought it was completely unreasonable.
It feels unreasonable, absolutely, because we are so conditioned to medicate our morning grogginess instantly. But the biological rationale for this 90-minute delay is rooted in the sheer elegance of our endocrine system.
Okay, lay it on me.
When you wake up, your body initiates a perfectly choreographed hormonal dance governed primarily by cortisol and melatonin. Cortisol is frequently demonized in wellness circles as purely a stress hormone.
Yeah, people are always trying to lower their cortisol.
Right, but it is actually your primary waking hormone. Under natural, healthy conditions, your cortisol is supposed to naturally rise to its daily peak shortly after you open your eyes.
And the melatonin.
Simultaneously, the melatonin, the hormone that facilitated your sleep, needs time to fully clear from your system.
So the morning grogginess isn't actually a lack of caffeine, it's just the transition period where the melatonin is fading out and the cortisol is ramping up.
Exactly. We call that sleep inertia.
Hmm.
And there is a crucial third element to this morning dynamic, the adenosine we just discussed.
Right, the exhaust.
Assuming you got a relatively normal night of sleep, your brain's glymphatic system spent the night clearing out all that metabolic exhaust. When you first wake up, your adenosine parking lot is virtually empty.
There are no sleepiness cars trying to park.
None.
Ah, I see where this is going. If the parking lot is empty, what are the caffeine sports cars even doing?
They're binding to receptors that aren't even under threat yet. It's a wasted defensive maneuver.
You're guarding an empty lot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you drink coffee immediately upon waking, you are introducing a receptor blocker when there is nothing to block. Worse, you are blunting the effect of your natural cortisol spike.
Wait, really? It messes with the cortisol.
Yes. Your body registers the artificial stimulation and essentially dials back its own natural waking mechanism. But if you wait that 90 minutes, you allow your natural cortisol to peak and do its intended job of waking you up.
And during that 90 minutes, some adenosine is probably starting to build up, right?
Exactly. You allow a small amount of adenosine to naturally begin accumulating in the brain. Then, when you finally introduce the caffeine at the 90-minute mark, it has maximum efficacy.
Because there's actually something to block.
Right. The parking spots are just starting to be sought after, and your caffeine can step in and block them perfectly, catching you right as your natural cortisol begins to dip.
Okay, I have to push back on this practically because intellectually, the biology makes total sense. We don't want to waste the caffeine when there's no adenosine to block.
Fair.
But for the person listening right now who is dragging themselves out of bed at 6:30 a.m. to get the kids ready or facing a brutal commute, if I crack my eyes open and my brain is screaming for coffee, what on earth am I supposed to do for an hour and a half? Just sit there and suffer through the sleep inertia.
The friction there is real, I get it. But the suffering is largely a product of a disrupted circadian rhythm. Flooding sleep inertia with caffeine just masks the transition. It doesn't fix it.
So how do we fix it?
The source material outlines specific protocols to bridge that 90-minute gap, and they all center around sending a massive, undeniable signal to your suprachiasmatic nucleus,
The what?
the master clock in your brain. You
Yeah.
have to signal to it that it is daytime.
Okay, so we're talking about environmental signals rather than chemical ones.
Yes, exactly. And the most potent environmental signal available to us is sunlight exposure, getting outside and allowing actual photons of light to hit your retinas.
Just looking at the sky.
Yeah. When light hits the melanopsin receptors in your eyes, it sends an electrical impulse directly to that master clock, which instantly shuts off melatonin production and triggers a robust release of cortisol.
So the light flips the switch.
It does. It is infinitely more effective at clearing sleep inertia than caffeine. The sources also point to physical grounding, breath work, or cold plunging.
Oof, a cold plunge instead of coffee.
I know it sounds harsh. But a 1-minute cold shower triggers an endogenous release of epinephrine adrenaline that will wake you up faster and more sustainably than an espresso shot.
So you're forcing your physiology to wake you up rather than relying on pharmacology. Let the cortisol and the sunlight do the heavy lifting for the first hour.
Exactly.
And then at that 90-minute mark, when the natural cortisol spike starts to level off and you might normally feel a little mid-morning dip, bam, that's when you deploy the caffeine.
You've got it.
It becomes strategic reinforcement rather than immediate dependency.
And by executing that subtle shift in timing, you completely alter how your body metabolizes the substance throughout the rest of the day. It drastically mitigates the dreaded afternoon crash.
Because you didn't suppress your own wake-up hormones.
Right, because you haven't prematurely overridden your natural waking mechanics, and you haven't created a massive backlog of unblocked adenosine waiting to flood the brain the moment the caffeine wears off.
Okay, that covers the brain's engine in the morning. But I want to take this biological lens and point it at the body's actual physical engine, the heart.
Let's do it.
Because this is where the source material completely blew my mind and contradicted almost everything I grew up hearing. For decades, coffee was treated like this guilty pleasure that was probably destroying our cardiovascular system.
Oh, absolutely. It was demonized.
The logic was always, well, it spikes your heart rate, it raises blood pressure, it's a stimulant, so it has to be causing long-term damage to the heart.
The historical context of those old assumptions is really fascinating. Early observational studies often linked coffee consumption to heart disease, but they suffered from a massive confounding variable.
Which was?
Smoking.
Right.
Yeah, in the mid-20th century, heavy coffee drinkers were also disproportionately heavy cigarette smokers. They went hand in hand.
Diner coffee and a cigarette.
Exactly. Once modern epidemiology learned to isolate coffee consumption from smoking and other detrimental lifestyle factors, the data completely inverted.
So what does this all mean? Are we officially ending the debate?
The debate is largely settled now, and the reality is the exact opposite of that old fear. Coffee is proving to be incredibly beneficial for long-term cardiovascular health. The sources highlight a highly significant 2025 study demonstrating that consuming 2 to 3 cups of coffee daily actually lowers the risk of cardiovascular disease-related mortality.
Which still sounds wild to say out loud. Drinking a daily stimulant lowers your risk of dying from heart disease. I'm struggling to understand why that is. How does a stimulant protect the heart?
Well, we have to stop looking at coffee purely as a caffeine delivery system. When we look at the cardiovascular benefits, the magic ingredient isn't the caffeine at all.
It's not.
No, it's the polyphenols.
Okay, I know polyphenols are associated with things like dark chocolate and red wine, but what actually are they?
Polyphenols are a massive category of plant-based compounds that act as incredibly powerful antioxidants in the human body. And here's a wild fact. Coffee happens to be the single largest source of antioxidants in the Western diet.
Wait, really? More than vegetables?
For the average person on a Western diet, yes, mostly because they drink so much of it. And their primary job is to protect your cardiovascular system from something called oxidative stress.
Let's drill down into that, because oxidative stress is one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around in wellness circles, but I don't think most people know what it physically looks like inside the body.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, oxidative stress is the silent driver of almost all cardiovascular decay. It is caused by free radicals.
Okay, and free radicals are?
Chemically speaking, free radicals are highly unstable molecules that are missing an electron. Because they are unstable, they violently roam around your bloodstream, looking to steal an electron from healthy cells to stabilize themselves.
They sound like little microscopic pirates.
That's a great way to put it. We produce some free radicals naturally through basic metabolism, but we are flooded with them from environmental toxins, processed diets, poor sleep, and chronic psychological stress.
And what happens when they steal an electron?
When these free radicals steal electrons from the cells lining your blood vessels, they cause structural damage and trigger localized inflammation.
I always picture oxidative stress like rust on a car.
Rust is a fantastic analogy.
So imagine your blood vessels are these pristine, smooth metal pipes. Over time, those unstable free radicals are like oxygen and water, causing those pipes to slowly rust. The rust creates rough patches along the smooth inner lining of the blood vessel. It weakens the structural integrity, it causes inflammation, and those rough patches are exactly where arterial gunk-like cholesterol gets caught and starts to build up into blockages.
The rust analogy is biochemically brilliant. That cellular rust is the genesis of atherosclerosis, the hardening and narrowing of the arteries.
So how does coffee fix the rust?
Now bring the polyphenols back into the equation. Antioxidants are molecules that have a surplus of electrons. They can afford to give them away.
Oh, so they just hand them over to the pirates.
Exactly. When you consume the polyphenols in coffee, specifically a highly concentrated one called chlorogenic acid, they sweep through your bloodstream and donate their extra electrons to those unstable free radicals, neutralizing them before they can steal from your blood vessels.
So the chlorogenic acid acts like a daily high-grade rust inhibitor. It coats the pipes and disarms the free radicals before the oxidative rust can ever form.
By actively preventing that oxidative damage, these compounds maintain the elasticity of your blood vessels, help regulate optimal blood pressure, and drastically reduce systemic inflammation.
Which stops the gunk from building up.
Right. And since chronic inflammation is the root environment necessary for cardiovascular disease to thrive, you are effectively removing the fuel for the fire.
The numbers attached to this in the research are staggering. The data shows that regular coffee consumption reduces the risk of developing type 2 diabetes, coronary artery disease, and stroke by an incredible 49%.
It is a statistical shield of massive proportions. We are talking about nearly cutting your risk in half for some of the most prevalent and deadly conditions in the modern world.
Just by maintaining a strategic 2 to 3 cup a day habit, it totally reframes the psychology of the morning routine.
It really does.
You aren't just giving yourself an energy boost to get through a boring meeting, You are actively pouring a biological rust inhibitor over your blood vessels every single morning.
And the systemic nature of that protection brings up a fascinating causality. If these polyphenols and antioxidants are sweeping through the bloodstream neutralizing free radicals, that blood is also pumping directly up into the brain.
Which perfectly leads to my next question. Does this rust happen in the brain too?
Oh, absolutely.
Because the short-term alertness of caffeine is great, but the source material goes deep into how coffee acts as long-term neuroprotection. I want to know how it protects the brain from decaying over decades.
The data here elevates coffee from a mere performance enhancer to genuine neurological armor. And to validate this, the sources reference a massive epidemiological study. The scale of this research is crucial to grasp.
How big are we talking?
We're talking about tracking over 184,000 participants over an extended period.
Wow!
Yeah, in scientific literature, a sample size that large eliminates almost all statistical noise. It gives the findings immense weight.
184,000 people. That's practically a small city they monitored just to see what happens to the brain on coffee.
And what they observed in this massive population was profound. Regular coffee drinkers demonstrated a 40% lower risk of developing Parkinson's disease compared to non-drinkers.
40%. Again, we're casually throwing around these jaw-dropping percentages for something we just sip while scrolling through our phones.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
I really want to understand the how here. What is the caffeine physically doing to the brain tissue to prevent Parkinson's?
The mechanism brings us right back to the receptors we discussed during the wake-up phase, specifically the A2AR receptors. To understand the defense, we have to understand the attack.
Okay, what's the attack?
Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative disorder characterized by the progressive death of dopamine-producing neurons, primarily in a region of the brain called the substantia nigra.
So Parkinson's is essentially a targeted attack on the brain's dopamine factory.
Correct. As these specific neurons die off, the brain loses its ability to regulate motor function, leading to the tremors, rigidity, and balance issues associated with the disease.
And where does coffee come in?
Now, the A2AR receptors in the brain are heavily involved in regulating that exact motor function pathway. And research indicates that overactivity or dysfunction at these receptor sites can contribute to the toxic environment that kills off those dopamine neurons.
Wait, and caffeine blocks those receptors?
Exactly. Caffeine, as we know, is a receptor blocker. By consistently binding to and blocking these specific A2AR receptors, caffeine actively mitigates that toxic overactivity.
So it calms the pathway down.
It regulates the motor function pathways and provides a highly targeted neuroprotective shield over those vulnerable dopamine-producing neurons.
So it's not just a generic antioxidant effect up there. The caffeine molecule is physically wedging itself into the exact receptors that are implicated in the progression of the disease. It's playing highly targeted defense.
It is playing defense on a microscopic level. And we see a very similar, though mechanistically distinct, defensive posture against Alzheimer's disease.
Really? Alzheimer's too?
Yes. The data shows that regular consumption reduces the onset of Alzheimer's by 31%.
I noticed the notes highlighted something called beta amyloid deposits when discussing Alzheimer's. What are those, and how does coffee interact with them?
Beta amyloids are essentially protein fragments. In a healthy, functioning brain, these fragments are broken down and naturally eliminated by the brain's waste clearance systems.
Like taking out the cellular trash.
Right. But in Alzheimer's disease, this clearance system fails. The beta amyloid proteins accumulate, they fold improperly, and they clump together to form hard, insoluble plaques in the spaces between the neurons.
If we go back to our analogies, I'm picturing this like plaque on your teeth, but for your brain cells.
That's a great visual.
If you don't brush and floss daily, that invisible sticky film hardens into tartar. Over time, that tartar causes inflammation in your gums, it decays the enamel, and eventually it rots the tooth entirely.
That's exactly how it works.
So in your brain, these sticky beta amyloid proteins build up, harden into plaques, and rot the cognitive hardware. They block cell-to-cell communication and trigger massive inflammation that destroys memory centers.
The brain flossing analogy is exceptionally accurate. Those plaques are the primary hallmark of the cognitive decline associated with Alzheimer's. And here is where the daily habit becomes vital.
Bring on the coffee floss.
Research suggests that caffeine, again through its complex interaction with the central nervous system and those A2AR receptors, actually suppresses the production of these toxic beta amyloid proteins.
It stops them from forming.
It suppresses the production, and it enhances the brain's ability to clear them out before they can harden into plaques.
So drinking caffeine is literally the biological equivalent of daily flossing for your brain cells. It's sending a janitorial crew up there every morning to ensure the sticky, toxic gunk doesn't build up and destroy the neural network.
It really highlights the dual action nature of the compound. I mean, in the short term, it's a stimulant increasing dopamine and overriding fatigue. But in the long term, it operates as a neurological janitorial force.
That is just incredible.
You are actively preserving the structural integrity of your memory and your motor function with every properly dosed cup.
Properly dosed being the critical phrase, which we are definitely going to get to. But before we dive into the guardrails and the dangers, we've secured the heart from rust, we've armored the brain against plaque. I want to know how this daily ritual affects the waistline and our physical output.
Ah, the metabolic engine.
Yes, because the source material goes heavy into that concept. If the engine is clean, how does coffee change the way we burn fuel?
This is where coffee transitions from a protective shield into an active physiological optimizer. When you ingest caffeine, it significantly upregulates a bodily process called thermogenesis.
Thermo meaning heat, genesis meaning creation.
Exactly. Thermogenesis is, quite literally, the process of your body generating heat.
Like turning up the internal thermostat of a house.
Exactly like that. And just like a house, to generate more heat, your body has to burn more fuel. In the human body, that fuel is primarily stored energy calories and fat.
So you just burn more calories sitting there.
Yes. By increasing thermogenesis, caffeine forces your body to burn more calories just to maintain that elevated internal temperature at rest. But it becomes particularly potent when paired with physical activity.
Okay, what happens when you work out on it?
It directly enhances fat oxidation, meaning your body becomes more efficient at tapping into fat stores for fuel rather than just burning through the easily accessible glycogen in your muscles.
So it's forcing the body to prioritize burning fat to keep the internal furnace running hot.
Precisely.
But there was another metabolic factor in the research that completely surprised me. I was reading through the notes and saw the acronym GLP-1. Wait, GLP-1, like the massive wave of weight loss drugs everyone is talking about right now? Ozempic, Wegovy, coffee does the same thing?
It acts on the exact same biological pathway, albeit in a natural endogenous manner rather than a synthetic pharmaceutical one.
Okay, unpack that for us. What is GLP-1?
GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1. It is a hormone naturally produced in your gut when you eat. Its primary evolutionary function is to signal to your brain that you are full.
The fullness hormone.
Right. It slows down gastric emptying, meaning food stays in your stomach longer, and it directly reduces appetite cravings in the brain.
And coffee triggers this.
It does. Caffeine and certain polyphenols in coffee naturally stimulate the release of GLP-1 from the gut. This is why coffee is such a proven, effective appetite suppressant.
That makes so much sense. I always wondered why I wasn't hungry after a large black coffee.
Exactly. So you aren't just getting a burst of nervous energy that makes you want to move around. You are fundamentally altering your hormonal landscape.
Wow.
You are increasing your energy expenditure through thermogenesis while simultaneously deploying a hormone that tells your brain you don't need to consume more calories.
It's a two-pronged metabolic attack. Burning more fuel, craving less fuel. And this leads to a very specific performance hack outlined in the deep dive, the pre-workout window.
Yes, the timing here is crucial.
The data specifically suggests drinking a cup of coffee exactly 30 minutes before a workout. Now, I've always just sipped it on the way to the gym or even in the locker room, but why is that 30-minute mark so critical biologically?
The timing comes down to the pharmacokinetics of caffeine, specifically its absorption rate and its peak blood plasma concentration.
Meaning how fast it gets into the blood.
Exactly. When you drink a cup of coffee, it doesn't instantly saturate your system. It has to pass through the stomach and be absorbed in the small intestine.
Right.
It takes roughly 30 to 45 minutes for the caffeine to fully enter your bloodstream and reach its peak concentration in your brain and muscles.
So if you drink it right as you walk into the gym, you are basically doing your first few sets completely unassisted.
Exactly. You're training on your baseline.
And the caffeine doesn't really hit until you are halfway done or maybe on your way home.
Precisely. By timing your intake exactly 30 minutes prior to exercise, you are perfectly synchronizing your biology with your activity. You ensure that your thermogenic engine is firing at absolute maximum capacity right as you begin your physical exertion.
Which maximizes the fat oxidation.
Right. Furthermore, at peak plasma concentration, caffeine blunts your brain's perception of effort.
It tricks you into thinking it's not that hard.
Yes. The central nervous system essentially ignores the fatigue signals from the muscles for a longer period. The workout literally feels easier, which allows you to push harder, significantly enhancing muscular endurance. You are simply extracting more physical output from the exact same training session.
Okay, so let's summarize the magic here. We have this incredibly complex compound. It wakes us up by hijacking the adenosine parking lot. It shields our heart from oxidative rust. It flosses the toxic beta amyloid plaque from our brain cells. It turns up our metabolic thermostat, and it makes our workouts tangibly better.
It's a miracle molecule when used right.
At this point, the natural human inclination is to think, great, if 1 cup is good, I'm going to drink a gallon of this stuff every day. I'm going to set up a coffee IV drip at my desk.
And that is exactly where things go horribly wrong.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is where we must talk about the guardrails. Because coffee is a massive double-edged sword. And if you get the quality, the dosage, or the timing wrong, you aren't just missing out on the benefits. You are actively destroying your health.
That cannot be emphasized enough.
Ah.
All of the miraculous benefits we just spent the last half hour discussing, the cardiovascular protection, the neuroprotection, the metabolic enhancement, they are highly contingent on incredibly specific parameters.
Guardrails.
Yes. If you ignore these guardrails, the entire biological equation flips. You negate the benefits and introduce profound systemic harm. And the very first guardrail we have to establish is quality.
And this is the part of the research that genuinely horrified me. Let's talk about the toxins.
This raises an important question regarding how our food is sourced, because the statistics on commercial coffee sourcing are alarming, to put it mildly.
Oh, lay the stat on us.
The source material highlights a staggering failure rate in global agricultural standards. It points out that over 90% of coffee beans sourced from Brazil, which is one of the world's largest exporters of commercial coffee, are contaminated with mold.
90%.
Yes, specifically strains of mold like Aspergillus.
That is an unbelievable contamination rate for a food product that millions of people consume every single day. How is that even possible?
It is a byproduct of the massive scale of commercial coffee production. The beans are harvested and often stored in colossal human silos for extended periods before they are processed and shipped.
And mold just loves humidity.
Exactly. That humid, densely packed environment is a perfect breeding ground for mold. Now, the issue isn't necessarily the living mold itself. It's what the mold produces as a defense mechanism.
What does it produce?
Aspergillus and similar molds produce mycotoxins, specifically one called ochratoxin A.
Mycotoxins. Fungal poisons.
Exactly. They are highly toxic chemical compounds produced by the fungi. And here's the critical danger. While the 400-degree roasting process easily kills the living mold spores, it does not destroy the mycotoxins they leave behind.
So roasting doesn't save us?
No. The chemical bonds of these toxins are incredibly formally stable. They survive the heat of the roaster, they survive the brewing process in your kitchen, and they end up directly in your mug.
So we are unknowingly brewing hot, toxic mold water every morning. What exactly do these mycotoxins do once they get inside the body?
Because they are a foreign toxin, your body immediately tasks the kidneys with filtering them out of the blood. but mycotoxins are notoriously harsh on renal tissue.
Kidney tissue.
Right. As your kidneys filter these compounds daily, the toxins cause localized oxidative damage to the nephrons, which are the microscopic filtering units in the kidney.
And over time.
Over years of daily consumption, this low-grade damage accumulates, leading to chronic kidney degradation. Furthermore, these toxins are known immunosuppressants and can cause severe respiratory infections and chronic systemic inflammation.
This is a devastating paradox. By buying cheap, mass-produced coffee, you are committing a critical biological error.
You really are.
Because you are drinking it, hoping to get the polyphenols to act as a rust inhibitor and reduce inflammation, but you are simultaneously ingesting a fungal poison that causes massive systemic inflammation and actively destroys your kidneys.
It completely cancels out the good and leaves you with compounding organ damage. You are taking one step forward and 3 steps back.
The polyphenols are basically wasted.
Exactly. They are wasted trying to fight off the mycotoxins you just introduced. The only way to ensure you are actually getting the health benefits we discussed earlier is to actively seek out coffee that is explicitly certified mold-free and laboratory tested for mycotoxins.
So you have to look for that certification.
Yes. It requires stepping off the commercial conveyor belt and being a highly conscious consumer about your sourcing.
Okay, so step 1. We upgrade our beans. We get the clean, lab-tested, mold-free stuff.
Right.
The next guardrail is the dosage. Because even with the cleanest coffee on earth, more is not always better.
Moderation is paramount. The clinical consensus, based on the epidemiological studies yielding the 40% reduction in Parkinson's and the cardiovascular benefits, is 1 to 3 cups a day. That is the optimal therapeutic window.
Okay, but what actually happens biologically when you go past 3 cups? Say you're hitting 4, 5, 6 cups just to get through a stressful work week.
You hit a biochemical plateau where the benefits completely stop and the detriments sharply rise.
The law of diminishing returns.
Exactly. You oversaturate the central nervous system. The excessive dopamine and norepinephrine stop providing clean focus and tip you into clinical anxiety, uncontrollable jitters, and a rapid heart rate.
Which is awful.
It is. Furthermore, excessive caffeine consumption at high volumes begins to heavily disrupt your sleep architecture, which brings us to the final, perhaps most important, guardrail of all.
The curfew. I love framing it that way.
It's the perfect term for it.
Because to understand the curfew, we really need to understand the lifespan of this drug in our body. And the research makes a very clear distinction between the half-life of caffeine and the active life. And I'm struggling a bit with the difference there.
It's a vital distinction. The half-life of a drug is simply the time it takes for your liver to metabolize and reduce the total amount of the substance in your body by exactly half.
Okay.
For caffeine, the average half-life in a healthy adult is typically 4 to 6 hours. So if you consume 100 milligrams of caffeine at noon, by 6:00 p.m., you still have 50 milligrams actively circulating in your bloodstream.
And by midnight.
By midnight, you still have 25 milligrams binding to those adenosine receptors.
Wow, that's the half-life. But the notes state the active life can be up to 9.5 hours, especially when we start talking about large volumes.
Because the sheer volume dictates the math. If you go to a coffee shop and order a large iced coffee or a cold brew at 3 p.m., you might be ingesting 300 to 400 milligrams of caffeine in one sitting.
Which is massive.
Huge. With a 5-hour half-life, 9.5 hours later, at 12:30 a.m., when you are desperately trying to sleep, your central nervous system is still dealing with nearly 100 milligrams of active caffeine.
That's a whole cup of coffee.
Exactly. Your brain is still registering a massive chemical presence of the drug.
Think about it like a rock concert.
Okay, I like this.
Imagine you decide to throw a loud, wild rock concert in your living room. A massive 4:00 p.m. cold brew is the concert. Now it's midnight, you're exhausted, and you want to go to sleep.
Right.
The band might have technically stopped playing. They packed up their guitars. That's the peak energy wearing off. But the massive amplifier speakers are still humming, your ears are still ringing, and the furniture is still vibrating from the bass. You are not going to get deep, restorative sleep in that environment.
The concert analogy perfectly describes what happens to your brain architecture. When you have that much active caffeine lingering in the system, you might feel exhausted enough to lose consciousness.
You might fall asleep, technically.
Right. You might successfully fall asleep. But the chemical vibration prevents your brain from dropping into the deepest, most restorative stages of sleep.
It keeps you in the shallow end.
It blocks the slow-wave delta sleep and fragments your REM sleep. Those are the exact stages where your body performs cellular repair, hormone regulation, and memory consolidation.
And sleep is everything.
As the source material emphatically states, high-quality sleep is our ultimate human superpower. If you compromise your deep sleep architecture just to get a cheap afternoon energy boost, you are systematically destroying your baseline health.
Which gives us the hard and fast rule. Do not drink coffee past 2:00 p.m., period. You have to protect your circadian rhythms at all costs.
The 2:00 p.m. curfew is non-negotiable if you want to optimize your biology. It ensures that by the time 10:00 or 11:00 p.m. rolls around, the active life of the caffeine has plummeted low enough that your natural melatonin can finally take over, open the gates, and guide you down into that restorative deep sleep.
Okay, this has been an incredibly eye-opening journey. We've taken something so incredibly mundane, something millions of people do completely on autopilot, and revealed the absolute microscopic complexity of it.
It's amazing when you look closely.
It really is. To wrap this up and summarize everything we've pulled from the deep dive today, it really comes down to what I'm going to call the holy trinity of coffee
I
rules.
like that, the Holy Trinity.
If you want to unlock the ultimate human benefits, if you want the cardiovascular rush shield, the neurological brain armor, and the thermogenic metabolic engine, you must respect the biology and do three things.
Let's run through them.
Number one, wait 90 minutes after waking before your first cup. Let your natural cortisol peak. Let the adenosine sleepiness cars pull into the lot, and stop hijacking your natural morning wake cycle. Use sunlight and physiology first.
Absolutely essential.
Number two, cap your intake at 3 cups maximum and strictly enforce a 2:00 p.m. curfew. Protect your deep sleep architecture at all costs because no amount of caffeine can replace a broken circadian rhythm.
Without sleep, none of the other hacks work anyway.
Exactly. And number three, ensure your beans are high quality and certified mold-free. Do not accidentally poison your kidneys with mycotoxins while trying to protect your heart with polyphenols.
If you adhere strictly to that framework, you are no longer just consuming a morning stimulant. You are utilizing a highly powerful, clinically proven biological tool to actively lower your disease risk, burn fat efficiently, and keep your mind remarkably sharp and resilient as you age.
It is a profound biological leverage point hiding in plain sight.
It really is.
And looking at it through this lens leaves me with a final, lingering thought for you to chew on as you go about your day. If simply adjusting the clock by 90 minutes on your morning coffee can fundamentally alter your brain chemistry, prevent neurodegenerative disease, and completely change your body's hormonal response, well, what other deeply ingrained, mindless daily rituals are you doing entirely wrong simply because you never pause to question the biological mechanics behind them? Think about it. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.